Union Depot. Much like the broader railroad industry, this iconic building has a rich history and has adapted to the changing times. And just like trains today, it still plays an important role in bringing people together. Join us as we explore the evolution of Union Depot and railroading in the modern era. The first Union Depot in St. Paul opened in 1881, but only lasted 3 years before it was damaged by fire and then rebuilt in 1884. During this time, it became an important stopping point for immigrants, emigrants, and orphans traveling on orphan trains. In 1913, fire struck once again, completely destroying the building. But this time, the St. Paul Union Depot Company determined that the capital city needed a grand building to take its place. Designed in the neoclassical style by noted architect Charles Sumner Frost, construction of the current building began in 1917. Completed and opened to the public in 1926, the new station had 10 train platforms, 21 passenger tracks, and saw an average of 20,000 passengers a day. Union Depot became the third largest mail handling station behind New York City and Chicago. At the time, Union Depot became one of the few employers that provided high-quality jobs for African American men. Known most often as Red Caps by the red uniforms they wore, they provided passenger assistance and concierge services for thousands of passengers each year, and their legacy is honored today in Union Depot's Red Cap Room. Union Depot would continue to serve many people in the decades that followed. However, the eventual development of buses, interstates, automobiles, and jet planes caused a steep decline in passenger train travel. In fact, intercity commercial ridership dropped from 98% in 1910 to just 37% in 1957. As a result, private railroads were forced to close many rail travel options. In 1970, Congress passed the Rail Passenger Service Act to help fund a new government rail passenger service, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, or NRPC, which operated as a private entity but received taxpayer funds. Under the act, the new service would be allowed to operate passenger trains on tracks owned by the private railroads, referred to today as host railroads. NRPC took possession of the majority of intercity passenger rail and branded themselves Amtrak. Despite these efforts, dwindling ridership saw the last passenger train leave Union Depot on April 30th, 1971. After the train's departure, the waiting room and concourse were closed. At a national level, the new Amtrak service resumed the very next month in May of 1971, but only on 50% of the previously operated routes. Some major rail passenger corridors became freight only as Amtrak shifted operations to a handful of routes, forcing passengers to find alternative means of travel. The bankruptcy of other private railroads presented Amtrak with a rare opportunity to lease their best passenger cars and locomotives, but the majority of the engines and rail cars retained their original paint scheme until Amtrak began to purchase the equipment and brand it cohesively. Facing multiple major challenges in its first few years of operation, Amtrak needed to secure further government subsidies in order to sustain its enormous operation costs. In the early 1970s, several eastern railroads went bankrupt. The largest of these was Penn Central, which owned the majority of the busy passenger routes between Washington, D.C., New York, and Boston, called the Northeast Corridor. In 1976, the U.S. government created Conrail to take over the bankrupt Eastern Freight Railroads, while Amtrak took over ownership of the intercity passenger service. In St. Paul, the United States Postal Service purchased the dormant Union Depot in 1977. The roundhouse was raised and all of the tracks were removed after the purchase, as it was converted to accommodate mail transport by truck. USPS used the property until 2010, when it moved operations to Eagan. As the 21st century neared, Amtrak ridership grew thanks to new amenities like improved food service, faster routes, more comfortable seats, and an expansion of station stops, which revitalized the concept of passenger rail. As fuel prices rose in the early 2000s, air travel prices prices spiked, and train travel once again became a cost-effective and popular option. Following the departure of USPS, Union Depot was purchased by the Ramsey County Regional Railroad Authority in an effort to preserve the historic gem. Extensive renovation plans and design work with contractors, architects, and historical groups ultimately led to the groundbreaking for the construction project in 2011. Restored to its original elegance, the work included a number of mechanical, electrical, HVAC, and communication upgrades which helped modernize the remarkable space. Union Depot reopened to the public in style on December 8, 2012, showcasing its original aesthetic with modern touches. Today, Union Depot is not just known as a multimodal transportation hub, it is also a private event venue, a condominium complex, a tenant space for multiple local businesses, and a host of many large-scale community events. On May 7, 2014, Amtrak pulled into the newly renovated and reopened Union Depot in St. Paul, marking the first passenger train to stop at this location in 43 years. To commemorate this historic week, Union Depot launched its first annual Train Days, a celebration of all things trains and transit. Named for the famous St. Paul local, James J. Hill, Amtrak operates the Empire Builder line through Union Depot, which runs from Chicago to Seattle daily. The history of Union Depot and passenger rail saw many twists and turns throughout the 20th century, but one aspect of the train industry has always endured: freight railways. Spurred by the invention and mass production of the diesel locomotive, patented by Dr. Rudolf Diesel in 1898, railroads facilitated cargo transport across the country at impressive speeds. The invention of the standardized shipping container in 1956 allowed for cargo to be efficiently and securely transferred between trains and ships by cranes rather than loading and unloading by hand. A crucial part of operating a train is understanding the horsepower per ton. Each train must be carefully planned using this formula to determine the number of locomotives and weight distribution. Each route has a tonnage rating that takes into consideration the maximum grade a train will encounter along the way.
As an engineer, all I was interested in was how long is this thing, how many tons does it weigh, and certain trains have better braking characteristics than other ones.
Modern freight train crews face many challenges when operating routes. Railroads run 24 hours a day in all weather conditions and over occasionally dangerous terrain. Engineers must watch signals to ensure the train does not collide with other trains, handle massive loads down mountain grades, switch cargo customers along the train's route, and watch for hazardous conditions. Heavy freight trains can take more than a mile to come to a complete stop with the emergency brake applied. Depending on conditions, it might not be possible to avoid collision with anything on the tracks. Because of these complexities, train crews operate under the Federal Railroad Administration's hours of service rules. Crews can be on duty no more than 12 consecutive hours, after which the crew is referred to as going dead. After this, an employee must take at least 10 consecutive hours off duty before they are permitted to return to work. In the Twin Cities, railroads are busier than ever with over 100 train movements every day. You can catch the action from Union Depot's 2 live webcams for a glimpse of modern railroading. The Railview picnic area in Lot D of Union Depot gives train fans a view of one of the most active freight railroad lines in the United States, with dozens of cargo movements each day. On the other side of the sprawling 33-acre property is the classic North Plaza and Head House, with stunning neoclassical columns and the start of the Metro Transit Green Line light rail system. Metro Transit began construction of the new public transit system in 2001, starting with the Blue Line that would service Bloomington to Minneapolis. The construction of the track and platforms for the Green Line began in 2010 with completion of the line in 2014. The Green Line connected St. Paul to Minneapolis and gave the public a multi-stop, rapid transit option beyond the bus network. With 37 stations and plans to extend both the Blue and Green Line, Metro Transit saw 23 million passengers in 2016, with steady numbers the following years. Popular stations including the MSP Airport, Allianz Field, Target Field, and US Bank Stadium make the light rail system convenient and affordable. Whether you arrive by Amtrak train, the Metro Transit Green Line, bus, bike, car, or by Skyway, Union Depot will connect you with where you need to go.